And we are live. I just realized I forgot to turn on my favorite lights and fans in this room. Do you mind if I do that real quick?
No, I don't mind.
Can you tell I'm wearing sweatpants with my button down?
Oh.
Did I sneak out and sneak in? Okay.
I actually wasn't paying close enough attention. Dang. I wish I was.
This is going to be a fun little chat. And just for the viewers' benefit, I have my notes on this computer screen so it doesn't look like I'm just daydreaming if I try to write some notes down while Jen is talking, so I can keep track of my thoughts. Okay, let's make sure I'm on Do Not Disturb on my devices. We're all set. Okay, so we're going to have a fun little chat about Scientology, relationships, getting married in the Sea Org, how Scientology conditioning for kids who grew up in Scientology affects relationships post Scientology. I don't know, maybe for some for the positive, mostly for the negative, I would argue. And also, we were kicking around the idea of having this chat with me, you, Liz Gale, and Mike Brown, which honestly would still be a really fun conversation to have.
Yeah, totally.
But coordinating 4 schedules is a pain in the butt. And sometimes it works for me to be like, hey, do you want to do a chat in 45 minutes? Which is pretty much what we did today. So I'll tell you what, there's 10 different ways we could start this conversation. But one of the things that's really fun about you and I having this chat together is that in many ways, our experiences on this subject are very similar. Both practical, well, you literally born and raised in Scientology, me almost born and raised in Scientology. Having grown up through our formative developmental years in a Sea Org environment, both having gotten married at, well, you got married younger than I did. I think I was 23 by the time I actually got married. But how old were you? Were you 17, 18, 20? What were you?
I was 18.
18, married in the Sea Org. I was 23, married in the Sea Org to someone I met in the Sea Org. You and Dallas met in the Sea Org, right? Well, of course, because you were born and raised in the Sea Org. Both of us getting out of 20-year marriages, 2 people we met in the Sea Org. And it's an interesting experience. I mean, the idea that a marriage could last for 20 years to someone you met in the Sea Org. And I don't know about you, but I feel like in any normal real world terms, me and Heather did not know each other by the time we got married. Like in real world terms, we'd known each other for weeks. I mean, even if it was months, you could still count it in weeks, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You don't know someone after weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And arguably, like, even like in many ways, being in a cult, you don't know yourself. So whatever sort of values you have, they're the values of the group. So you guys share those at that time. But, you know, later on, when it comes to learning about your own values, and those can be very different, but, you know, they were the same when you were in the Sea Org. And that's something that you kind of get over time, and you kind of have to figure out what they are after you leave.
That's interesting. Cult values. I hadn't actually thought about that. But one of the things like that I thought when you said that is what you value about each other is whatever it is the cult values in people. Right? So am I saying the same thing that you're saying?
Well, I guess you're right. But I guess like just for instance, like, you know, after thinking about it for a long time, like loyalty is something that I value very much. And I value, like, you know, sort of like standing up to somebody who's a bully. Well, like, and my ex-husband, he would, you know, maybe his values are very much family oriented, and mine, I do care about family a lot, but if your family is bullying you, then I would be more likely to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to put up with that. And he would be like, well, we can't ever disconnect from them because they're family. And that's a huge value for him. But it's not for me, just by nature of the way that I grew up. I don't want that to be misconstrued like that my kids or something like that aren't the most important thing to me. But it's just a huge difference in values that constantly were clashing with each other, which is something that we wouldn't really have known about at the time. Like they have courses in Scientology, personal values and integrity, but really they just teach you about the values of the group. They never really have you think about what you value as a person and what you are able to, like, I guess I consider my values to be, if I don't live by these things, then I kind of can't live with myself. Or maybe I won't like myself. So they kind of don't really teach you about, or they don't make you think about those.
I promise you, I was listening to every word that you said while I was playing with my microphone. Guys, I was distracted. The live chat is saying that Jenna's volume is much, much louder than mine. Can you guys in the live chat do me a favor? If Jenna sounds much louder than me, please type 1. And if it sounds totally fine, please type 2.
They said this last time. That's why I thought it was funny that you're so worked up about my mic when you should be worrying about yours.
Our microphones may be fine. Our audio levels might be different. Or you just might have your volume jacked up really high to, mess with me here a little bit.
If I do, and also, because you made me do all those settings last time that I have no idea what they are. So it's literally your fault.
Before we go live, I'm usually doing something to Jenna similar when you go to the eye doctor and it's like, tell me which one's better, A or B? A or B? I think it's the same. A or B? Okay, now get close to the mic. Say, Mary had a little lamb. Do it again. All right. Well, a lot of people are saying that you're louder. So I'm just going to talk louder. No, I don't know. We're not going to worry about it. So, when you mentioned the thing about loyalty, let's say you're getting bullied by family members, whereas your ex-husband might have more valued maintaining the family connection and excusing the bullying. And you used the word disconnection, but you just meant like you're not going to necessarily put up with having to be around someone who you feel is bullying you just because they are a family member, right? You're like, I'm only going to have people around me that I feel are, make me happy. And I'm not going to, that's kind of, I'm understanding what you're saying, right?
Right. Like, I don't mean I'm going to like disconnect Scientology wise, although on some level it is like, I'm not going to go to that party if I'm not going to be treated well. And if you keep going, then you're enabling that situation. Right.
I'm just going to keep my microphone closer to me than I normally would, just to for the heck of it. One thing that was kicking around in my head when we were talking about having this conversation about how Scientology affects relationships or how we approach relationships or what we put up with in relationships is, for me, there's this thing in Scientology where, and what I'm going to say is anecdotal from my experience, because I feel like other people could very easily have had different experiences than this. There's an aspect of my experience on staff and in the Sea Org and in Scientology in general, where it's almost no one ever gets rid of anything. No one ever gets rid of anything or anyone. Now, as soon as I hear that, I can think of all the contradictions to this. Like, what are you talking about? Scientology declares people and kicks them out and enforces disconnection. But what I'm thinking when I say that is, when we were in the Sea Org, there's such a scarcity of Sea Org members that, with a few exceptions, no matter how bad a Sea Org member is, or if that Sea Org member is one of your juniors, you are trained to believe that your job is to do whatever is possible to fix them. You're not allowed to go down to the HR manager and say, get rid of this person. You don't, only the HR manager can decide whether to get rid of people. You can't be like, this person's unfixable, this situation's unfixable, get them out of here, transfer them somewhere else, send them somewhere else. Your job as an executive, the only thing you're allowed to do is use whatever tools you can come up with to make that person the best version of whatever you have to work with, right?
Right.
And I feel like, not just in relationships, but in many aspects of my life, that has put me in a place where it's almost like the only thing I can ever envision, the only thing that ever seems possible to me, no matter how bad a situation is, and in this case, we're talking about relationships, no matter how bad a relationship is, the only thing I can envision is how to try and make it the best possible version of the bad thing that it is.
Mhm.
And it doesn't really enter into my mind that the best thing might be to get rid of it altogether or to end it.
Right.
And it's funny because like I feel like that's a lesson I uniquely personally have taken, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's the lesson anyone else has taken. But when I was thinking about this recently, I was thinking about all the time I spent in the Sea Org with juniors who very much did not want to be there.
Mhm.
And who I very much did not want to be there because they clearly didn't want to be there. And I didn't have the patience to put up with people who didn't want to be there. But like they weren't allowed to leave and I wasn't allowed to get rid of them. And
Right.
all I had to do was figure out how to manage this to be the best possible version of the bad thing that it was.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess we're sort of raised to believe that Scientology can fix anything.
Yes.
And so, or that it has a solution or a technology for anything. And that includes, people you're working with and any relationship of any kind.
Yes.
And like, I guess, like a sort of branch off of that is, just the fact that communication is the universal solvent. And it's hard to bring that up as an untruth because, of course, it's something that's very much true. Communication helps everything. But I guess on some level, maybe it doesn't need, like, it can solve many situations, but if you have values that aren't matching, you can't communicate your way out of that situation. You can even communicate that, okay, we're not right for each other, but trying to use communication to fix something that is at the essence of the person, that's not something that they would want to ever change. It's something that they consider good about themselves and many other people would consider very good about them. It's just not a good match. You sort of can't communicate that to death.
I think you just nailed it. And it's funny because this concept that Scientology really pushes, communication is the universal solvent, is also kind of directly contradicted by Scientology insisting on declaring people and expelling them and forcing everyone to disconnect, and Scientologists running away from the protesters and refusing. Like, there's so many ways in which Scientology contradicts what is supposed to be one of its most fundamental principles. But it is something that we, as good little Scientology Sea Org members and staff members, was really dinged into us that if you didn't believe this, then you weren't a Scientologist.
Right.
That you can solve anything and everything with communication. And this actually creates some interesting problems in relationships.
Right.
Because sometimes the right thing to do is to take a pause.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I remember in the marriage ceremony, it talks about never going to bed on an ARC break, which is like an upset. And I think that's the only thing I remember about the whole thing and that whole ceremony. I don't remember.
Is that because you loved it or you hated it?
I thought it was really important and true. And I still don't know. Like, I still believe that, but there has been many times when that it has been proven that it is better just to take a break. And it's really even hard for me to say that because I still am like, but can that really be true? So, but that's something that's like, it is good to take a break if you're like too heated or if you're both being like irrational. But that's just, it's hard not to believe that anything can be solved through communication.
Yes. I can understand how some people would struggle with that. I mean, I'm never irrational in conversation, so it's hard to understand, but I've come to understand how that can happen. I'll tell you, it's really, really funny. So when Heather and I got married in the Sea Org, she very, very much took that never go to bed on an upset seriously. And it's a very romantic idea. And any good relationship counselor might tell you that. But I'll tell you what would happen with us when we were still in the Sea Org is she would only bring that up like when we were about to go to bed. And I'm thinking to myself, if this principle was so important to you, maybe you should have brought it up an hour ago instead of when we're actually trying to fall asleep. Because this was a perfect example where communication is supposed to be the universal solvent, and never going to bed on an upset is one of these cute little things that they say in the Scientology marriage ceremony. And it was important to her, and she would want to, I guess I'm going to say force the communication, not in like an actual forceful way, but be like, this is very important. In order for us to show that we love each other, we have to not go to bed until this is resolved. And I'm thinking, yeah, the likelihood of this getting resolved is decreasing proportionally to the amount of time that's being taken away from the sleep I'm going to get tonight.
I don't know. I'm with Heather on this one. I mean, when
I know.
When the F else were you guys going to talk about it during post time?
How about not 5 minutes after we actually lay down to go to bed? But it's funny because I see myself, I can think of so many examples where I come down on both sides of this argument of whether it's the right thing to do to keep talking or the right thing to do to stop talking. I can think of all the examples in which I come down on different sides of this argument. So there's plenty of times when when I get upset, it's very hard for me to get unupset. Like when I get upset, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. Like it only gets worse. And it's like, because I'm a talker, and I'll repeat myself, and I'll go in circles. And the more I hear myself make my argument, the more convinced I am of the rightness of what I'm saying. And then I get more indignant and righteous, and it doesn't get better. And that's an example where it's like, you know what? I think there's two important things that I should say to myself. There is one, this isn't getting better. Just take a time out. Go to the gym, come back in a couple hours and ask yourself, is this really as big of a deal as it feels like it is right now? And then there's another question of, is this argument more important than the relationship itself? Like at some point, who cares whether you're right or wrong? Who cares who was right or wrong here? Like, is anything being discussed right now more important than just the relationship itself? Now, I got to tell you, that's a question I've started to ask myself more recently that never in a million years would have even occurred to ask myself in any of the time I spent in Scientology. Is this thing that's being argued about right now more important than the relationship itself?
Yeah.
Because in some respects, Scientology just doesn't value relationships.
Right. That's very, very true. And yeah, you did mention this earlier. It's like on one level, they expect you to stay together no matter what, because if you tell all of your overts or whatever else, you would never want to leave. But on the other hand, if you are leaving or whatever, they're just like, or if you change positions, they like are happy to just tell you to divorce your spouse at any minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that brings up an amazing tangent, and I don't know if you want to go off on a tangent, but this idea of Scientology marriage counseling, where they do say that if you, Scientology has a word, the word is blow, and blow means to leave something, especially without permission or without authorization or in an upset way. And they say if you blow from anything, whether it's a course or a team or an organization or a marriage, it's because you've done destructive things that you don't want people to know about. And because you're natively good as a spiritual being, you're trying to protect the people you've hurt. You're trying to protect them from further harmful acts by leaving so that you can't hurt them anymore. And the theory here is that if you just divulge all of the bad things you've done, you will feel the burden of having to protect these people from yourself will be lifted, and you won't feel the urge to leave. And so Scientology marriage counseling is having both people sit down at the same time with the Scientology auditor and to divulge with your partner in the room all of the bad things you've done to your partner or behind their back. Now, Jenna, I have always thought that that would be the most abusive thing you could do to a partner, would be to sit there and make them listen to everything their partner had done to them. What did you ever do Scientology marriage counseling?
No, I didn't. No.
What did you ever think it sounded like something that would work?
I think it's funny because I can see how you would think that that would sound abusive, but it would. But I guess on some level, I would like value the truth a little bit more. I think maybe not in that Scientology scenario, but I do think that like maybe honesty would bring you closer. But yeah.
I mean, for sure, honesty will bring you closer, but on some level, I feel like it'd be like, I don't want to have to know everything you've done to me. I'd much rather feel reassured that we're putting our past is our past, and we're committed to our future. And I don't need to know, like, I don't want to know everything that you've done. Why would I want to know? That's going to make me not trust you. I don't want to be thinking about those things.
Yeah. I see what you mean. I mean, you don't want to have those in the back of your mind all the time, especially in Scientology when you're probably talking about thoughts a lot of the time, and everyone has thoughts. So, yeah, I can see how that would definitely make it a lot worse. But if you're saying if learning the truth will make me not trust you, then it seems like then maybe you should just not trust them.
But there's already a baked-in premise, if you're doing the Scientology marriage counseling, that you're there because you've already done a lot of bad things to each other and secret things behind their backs and things that you don't want them to know. There's already a baked-in implication that you violated each other's trust up one wall and down the other. So do you see what I mean? And it's
I see what you mean. Yeah. Like meaning like you should be like, okay, we did that. Now we don't need to talk about it endlessly. Let's just decide to be better from here on out, rather than.
That's yes. Now that's just funny because I always thought that Scientology marriage counseling sounded like one of the most sadistic things you could possibly. Now, but you see, I don't know what couples counseling consists of in the real world. I have no idea what it consists of. Did you in Dallas ever do any couples therapy or whatever?
Only a few, only 2 sessions. It did not go well. I was so pissed off by the time we were there. And just the fact that somebody who was my therapist was listening to this guy, I was incensed. I was like, what? That is not. I was honestly horrible. It was 2 sessions, but way too late.
I can't stop thinking of some stand-up comedy bit that I heard years and years and years ago of someone talking about women always bringing up anything you've ever done wrong. Someone will, your partner will bring it up years later anytime you're in an argument and be like, you be just driving down the road minding your own business, and you're like, baby, take a left up here, and she's like, did you take a left with that bitch? Like, no left turns, right turns only.
That's so funny because that's a huge I think on some level Dallas was like, you never really forgave me for what happened in Scientology. He's like, it always comes back to this.
That's right. And that was that mostly because in Scientology, he did not defend you. He was always reporting on you and kind of throwing you under the bus to the authorities. That's kind, I mean, you and I have discussed that in one of our previous chats, right?
Right. Yeah. But it's sort of when I was talking about values, Dallas was doing that because they were threatening him with never seeing his family again. If that was something that I was threatened with, I'd be like, who cares? And so it was actually an innate difference in values that it was made obvious at those times, but it but because that was true, it continued to be true throughout our whole marriage. So the reason why it would keep coming up is because he would act in that way all the time. And again, that's just because of his values. Many people would think that that's not wrong at all. And yeah, so that's why I would keep bringing it up.
I want to go back for a moment to this idea of how I felt that Scientology instilled in me the idea that the best thing you could aspire to is to simply make whatever you have the best version of whatever it can be. And the idea of, well, maybe you should get rid of this thing and just, I'll use strong language. Maybe you should just throw this thing away and get something new. What's wrong with that idea? Why do you have to keep improving the thing that you have just because it's what you already have, and thinking that that's the best and highest thing you could aspire to achieve, instead of being like, well, maybe this isn't the right thing, and maybe what I really need is a different thing. I guess I can only speak for myself, that I feel that that's kind of the values Scientology instilled in me when it came to relationships. But it's almost like it accidentally instilled those values in me, because there's no part of Scientology that says you shouldn't end a relationship. Maybe some relationships just, when it comes to romantic relationships, I mean, Scientology tells you to disconnect from people all the time. But when it comes to like romantic relationships, it's not like there's some datum that Scientologists are like, no, it's not okay to end a relationship. I mean, the turnover of marriages in the Sea Org is like unbelievably high. But for whatever reason, for better or for worse, I was left with this idea that when it comes to relationships, the right thing to do, the best thing to do, is just make the best of whatever it is, even if it's not great. Did you feel the same way?
Well, I guess like what you were just saying, it's basically, it's like, it's okay to get rid of a relationship and just throw it in the trash if it is good for the group. So if it's good for your position, if it is somehow what Scientology wants, if one of you wants to leave, one of you doesn't, then that's good for the group. But outside of that, the only reason you would leave is because you've done bad things. And if you can't make it work, it's essentially saying that you didn't apply Scientology, or Scientology isn't working. So you can basically like endlessly apply Scientology to it, and it will eventually work. It's the answer to everything.
That is exactly what it is. Let me force quit my signal, since it always likes to ring when I'm on a chat. That's exactly what it is. Scientology says that its tools work 100% of the time when applied 100% correctly. So how could a relationship possibly break down to the point where it just cannot be fixed? It's almost like, if you truly believe in Scientology, that wouldn't be possible. And yet, sorry, I'm burping over here because I'm drinking all this seltzer water. And yet Scientologists don't seem to particularly value marriage, but yet you and I are both sitting here saying things that would make it sound like they do. How do you think about this?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's true that they don't particularly value marriage, which is, yeah, like when I think about, like, when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to get married when I'm 17, because many Sea Org members got married when they were really young, much younger than that. But I was never like, because I want to have an amazing relationship with somebody who I have so much in common with, and we're going to, do great things together, and we're going to do all this stuff together. It was never like that. It was almost like a social thing. Like it was just something that you were supposed to do. So there would be no reason to value it. Like, if anything, it would be seen as a loyalty that is a threat to your loyalty to Scientology. Meaning, like, two people together, if one of you wants to leave, it's the choices between, one of you staying with Scientology and leaving with your spouse. It's almost like one of the only things that could call into question your loyalty to Scientology. So in some ways, it's an actual threat. So I guess that's maybe why they're not like They don't see it as hugely important. But yeah, I'm trying to think about why after leaving, it was so important to hold it together, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe you and I had different reasons for that. Like I had worked so hard to, oh, well, maybe you did too, but to hold my marriage together. Like Scientology really, really, really tried to mess with it. And I like had succeeded by like a hair in staying together. And so after I left, I just felt like it would just be such a big failure to have a failed marriage, and that they would be like using that against me, and it would make them so happy. And I just never saw it as an option. I never saw divorce, honestly, as an option, which is so weird. Like half of the country gets divorced, or I don't know if it's the country or the world, but it's like, but it was just never something that I thought I would do.
I definitely felt the same way. And for me, relationship wise, so but okay, so your marriage situation leaving the Sea Org was different than mine, because as soon as you and Dallas left the Sea Org, you were immediately pretty much persona non grata to Scientology. They were already gunning against you guys. They already were like, we do not want these guys to, like, we're gunning for them. Whereas when Heather and I left the Sea Org, we were still considered good guys for about another, wow, quite a long time, actually. Well, yeah, another 3 or 4 years.
And we
So
probably
people were
left
not,
at the same time around.
yeah, I think we left in like May 2006. When did you guys leave?
In November 2005.
Okay, you left 6 months before we did.
Yeah.
For me, relationship wise, it's, oh my God, this is so funny. It goes back to just childhood. Like, me and my brother were raised by a mostly single mother who had kind of a revolving door of boyfriends and husbands. And that was really anxiety inducing as a child. And I would never want that for my kids.
Right.
And so I just valued having an intact family unit, regardless of how good or bad it was. I mean, again, my goal was to make it the best version of the not great thing that it was. And the only reason it was a not great thing is Heather and I did not know each other when we got married. And when you talk about group values, like, I was a pretty well known and respected and valuable Sea Org member, even though not a high level Sea Org member. Heather was a very well respected officer of a senior organization. And it was kind of like a very picture perfect Sea Org couple.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. Totally.
And we didn't, just on a personal level, it's like, I don't want to sound like the most unromantic person in the world, and so I'm not going to, but it's like, you're in a cult. You're working 19 hours a day. You don't even eat meals together. Like, we were in different level organizations. We didn't even eat meals together. The only time we even see each other on meal times is I would eat my meal as quickly as I could. She would eat her meal as quickly as we could. And we could maybe see each other for, 10 or 15 minutes in our room before we had to go back to post or whatever.
And you're surrounded by a bunch of people all the time.
Exactly. And so it wasn't until we left the Sea Org that I think it just became apparent that we didn't enjoy the same things. We don't enjoy the same people. It's not like it was horrible, because horrible to me is fighting, violence, insulting. We never had that kind of relationship. We weren't best friends, and it'd be hard to even call us good friends. Like, oh my God, I'm just going to say the most terrible unromantic thing ever. I remember hanging out with my buddies, my Clearwater, local buddies, and we'd go out every single night like clockwork, and we'd go out to the cigar bar and we'd have drinks. And one time we were just hanging out, and I said, guys, I gotta ask you something here. Do you guys actually like enjoy hanging out with your spouse? And they're like, huh? I mean, like if you ever had to choose between spending time with your friends or spending time with your spouse, is there any scenario in which you would rather spend times with your spouse? And they're like, yes. I'm like, really? Like,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was like it was a foreign concept to me because I just valued us being able to spend as much time with our kids as possible for as long as possible. We just love our kids to death, and our kids love us to death. And it's
Yeah.
not like we're just we never had a relationship we were just fighting all the time. I mean, sure,
Mm.
especially when we were going through all she was losing her family. Believe me, there was a couple of really rough years, and yeah, there was
Mhm.
some shouting matches in front of the kids for sure, but
Mhm.
nothing compared to what I grew up witnessing with my mother.
Mm.
And so there was a part of me that was like, the best we can aspire to do is to make this the best version of the not great thing that it is for as long as humanly possible. That's what caused me to feel like divorce was not an option. What do you think drove you feeling like divorce wasn't an option?
I think that I was like, did not want to have my kids experience in any way what I experienced. So like me not being around or them just sort of like I felt alone a lot when I was a kid, like because I was often in another state than my parents. So I didn't feel alone without friends, but I was like, I kind of just like felt like I was on my own. Like I was like, is anyone really thinking about me or wondering where I am? And I, and also like there wasn't really anybody there to advocate for me. So if I didn't want to do something, just sort of no one had my back. And so I wanted very, very much to have that for my kids. Like I wanted them to feel like cozy and warm and like not like they had to work all night even, but I overdid it by so much. Like I really like overworked myself, and I probably like tortured Dallas because I was like doing so much work and I was like, why aren't you helping me? And he was like I would literally like wake up in the morning and I would like put their blanket in the dryer, and then I would carry them from their beds and put them on the couch, and then I would make them 2 separate meals, and then I would like put a cartoon in their lunchbox, and then I would volunteer at the school. God, I sound like a psycho. It's like so I was just like, it was such a huge deal to me that I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I made them ever feel kind of how I felt, which sounds, yeah, it just was like, it was like I could take that, but I didn't want them to ever feel that way. And so just the idea of going through divorce or like parents not living together or anything that was like other than a perfect, cozy home um, was like, it just seemed like the worst thing I could do. It was literally it was the most important thing to me in the world. And so that would have been just like such a failure and such a betrayal to them and myself. It was just such a huge deal. Like even now when I talk about it, I realize that it was like a coping mechanism because no matter what, it was never going to happen to them what happened to me, but I just took it so seriously for so long. And yeah, just any sort of divorce or anything like that would have just like gotten in the way of this perfect recreation that I was constantly trying to make.
That is interesting. To me, that's what when I say that's interesting, I mean, like, it wasn't even that you were doing that because of values Scientology instilled in you. It was almost the opposite. It was to fight against, make sure your kids had a different, as much of a different experience as you did as possible.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And like, and so, one other thing that is a little bit different is that when Dallas and I came out of the Sea Org, he had already been out of the Sea Org in his youth. And so he had a lot of interests and things. And I hadn't really had a chance to explore any of my interests or even like learn about myself because I never really had time to do that. And so I sort of would try to adapt whatever he was into and be like, oh my God, I love this. And it was things like motorcycle racing and like surfing, and like I would always like try to do those things, and snowboarding. And then it took me like a long while to realize, I was like, I fucking hate these things. I do not give a shit about them. And I've been forcing, and now I sound like a horrible person because I hate all those things, but I don't really hate them. I just don't want to do them all the time. Or like camping at the beach for a week. It's like I can go to the beach for a day, but I don't want to be there for the whole week. I just don't want to. And so I was just trying to like adapt myself, and thought that there was something wrong with me, that I didn't like the same things as him. Like there was like something broken inside me that I couldn't enjoy those things, when really that wasn't the case at all. We're just completely different.
Dallas and Heather should definitely get together, because Heather loves the outdoors stuff. I can't stand it, because I can stand if it's 50 or 60 degrees, I'm on board. But anything over 68 degrees, and she likes the camping, she likes the hiking, she likes the not showering for several days in the wilderness. And I'm like, I mean, I don't care what kind of air mattress or sleeping bag or tent there is. I'm like, I have a bed at home and air conditioning and an oven and a stove, and I don't have to cook my food on a fire. Like, I guess, does that make me high maintenance? What is that? Does that just make me a sissy? I don't know. I'm not a big outdoors guy.
No, that's fine. I mean, I can relate to, like, I feel like I was trying to pretend like I was, and I think I am a little bit more than you are.
More what?
I like the outdoors a tiny bit more than you are, but it's because I'm not as
bit.
temperature sensitive. It's not as big of a
Yes.
deal to me. But it's
And you
actually
don't seem
like,
to mind bugs? Do you not mind bugs?
like I feel, well,
Or they just leave you alone. The bugs just kind of leave you alone. Whereas to me, I'm like a bug magnet.
right. Yeah, exactly. I think that I'm not as much of a magnet as you are for bugs. But yeah, I don't like doing that stuff all the time. Like I like having a garden, but I absolutely hate going to Supercross. Like I hated it the whole time, and I can't believe I pretended like I liked it. I'm like, what was I even doing? God, I hated it. And actually, like,
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. And when you're talking about the conversation with your friends, so I guess my version of that was that like me and Dallas were fine together, but for some reason when I was with my friends, I was uncomfortable with him being there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I can't even explain it. So it wasn't like me and Dallas didn't like doing things together. Like we traveled a lot together, and it was fine. But yeah, there was something like about hanging out with friends. We were just very different. Like I talked a lot, he was more quiet. And his family, they don't like, in his immediate family, they like don't talk when they're together. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like we just sit here in silence. This is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced in my life. Like, so yeah, there were just differences in times that I felt like there was something wrong, but I always just blame myself. I don't know why. I thought it was because I wasn't like integrating into the regular world properly. That's for some reason that's how I thought it was, or it was because I was in Scientology.
Let's jump forward a little bit, because I know for the purposes of this conversation, we're kind of trying to wrap it up here soon. But we can have 20 of these conversations, because I think these are the conversations, honestly, I've never heard anybody have. I've never heard Scientologists talk about the relationship side of it. And it's really fun. It's fun to explore it. And I think it's helpful to make other people realize we're all pretty screwed up from what we went through.
Yeah, and we all have different takeaways from it. Like we are all addressing it in a different way. And it will be interesting also just to hear how other people address it as well, how other people dealt with it.
Because we're kind of trying to wrap this up somewhat soon here, because of everything we said about kind of wanting to, well, we didn't even consider divorce was an option. What can you say about what finally changed that for you?
So for the last like 5 years, I was having my own business where I would grow and sell flowers. And I was trying to take care of the kids as much as I had been, and at the same time, do that. And that just resulted in so much arguing with me and Dallas. And I started going to therapy because he wouldn't. I feel like that's pretty typical, like where the woman will go to therapy and the man won't. Not in all cases. But I started going. And when I would talk to her, I would say, well, I know this is my fault. And I know that I'm a bitch. And I know this. And she'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why are you saying that? She would be like, so it was the first time she said, if you're mad, even if you're not addressing it in the right way, there's actually a reason. And I guess through speaking to her for like several months, I kind of realized that it was very true that in order to exist in this relationship, I had to put myself down constantly. And, I don't think that it was something mean or evil on his part. It was just a complete difference in personality and values. And in order to coexist together, I kind of had to take one for the team and just always apologize and assume that it was my fault and always put in twice the effort to make it work. And it seems like a bad result of therapy, but it's actually not. Like, it kind of made me, I don't know, it kind of opened the door to me not constantly having to apologize for being myself and not sort of, and not always assume that I was a bitch or anything like that, and actually sort of trust my instincts. Why is that so funny?
So it was therapy. Therapy is the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Because now that you mentioned that, if I had gone the therapy route, I probably would have gotten divorced years earlier. I mean, some of the evidence for that is when I did finally have my first therapy session, it was like, it was probably June of last year. After some crazy stuff had happened. And I didn't know what to expect. And I have described this session in ways that some people might have thought I was describing it derogatorily. I said, look, I spent $350 to be told for an hour that it really is okay to get a divorce. But when I describe it that way, I'm not describing it derogatorily. That really was what I needed to hear. People had been telling me for years. My friends had been telling me for freaking years. My best friend had gone through a divorce. He has 4 kids with his ex-wife, and he was committed to never leaving that marriage, even if only to make sure his wife couldn't damage the kids. Like, he thought he was there to protect. If anything, he was going to stay in the marriage to protect his kids from being damaged by his wife. And he thought, there's no way I would never leave. And she was the one that kept trying to leave him. And and it was this weird thing. And when he finally got divorced, he was like, holy shit, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And he kept telling me, like, you don't even understand how good life can be, to leave a relationship that you're only holding on to for the wrong reasons, and to just move on. So anyway, I had the therapy session. Me complaining about it was really complaining at the cost. Like, my friends have been telling me to get a divorce for a long time for free. It was about $350 for the hour of therapy, and I'm like, when I've said I'd rather have the conversations with my friends over some beers, that's kind of what I mean. But in an interesting way, hearing it from a therapist, instead of having them tell me that, like, I just thought they were going to tell me how screwed up I was and how everything was my fault.
Right. And
maybe that's what some people need to be told. I was kind of surprised that this very well-trained, tons of therapist has tons of experiences, even especially with Scientologists, that what she thought was valuable to tell me in that session was, it's okay to get a divorce. It really is okay.
Right.
And so I feel like if I had gone the therapy route, I would have gotten divorced years and years earlier. Instead, what happened was, as I've mentioned in my videos, back in late 2019, me and Heather basically came to terms with the fact that this was in no way, shape, or form a healthy marriage. You couldn't even really call it a marriage. And we were going to stay together for the kids' sake. But it was really me who was saying this. Like, it was really me who was saying, I'm not going to be like this for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be stuck in this thing for the rest of my life. I'm not going to feel this way for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to move on. But this is the way I'm proposing that we move on. But none of us were doing this under any guidance or professional advice. It was just us trying to make the best possible version of the not great thing that we had and doing what we could with what we knew.
Right.
And so if someone says, well, what made you change your mind on that? People trying to use my personal life to humiliate me and blackmail me and shame me and demean me. And I was like, oh, fuck, this didn't work.
Well, that's what's so messed up about it is like for the first time in your life, you're trying to do something that's right for you and recognizing the issue in something. And then that gets used against you and you get shamed for it. And that's just Scientology all over again. So that's what's really unfortunate about it. But yeah, it is interesting because going into therapy, it was with the intention of not getting divorced. And I never thought that getting divorced was a solution. But it wound up being that it definitely was.
Yeah. Now it's funny. I'm not someone who looks on the past and feels a regret. Like, regret is an emotion I don't particularly feel. I tend to go, anything that's ever happened to us is something we've learned lessons from. So even though it may have been better for me and my wife and our kids for us to have gotten divorced years ago, one of the things that made it easier for me to go, okay, now's the time to get a divorce, is that my kids are older.
Right.
My kids are 17, 15, and 13, and they're very mature for 17, 15, and 13. And I don't feel that I feel they're at an age where I don't have to feel so bad about the family unit not being what it was in their earlier and most formative years. Was that something you worried about?
Yeah, that's
your kids are just a little younger than mine.
Yeah, my daughter's 12 and my son is 15. I guess it wasn't so much that they were older. I was really, really worried that my kids would hate me, like that they would be so angry at me and they wouldn't forgive me. And I was just like so traumatized by that. And then when I told them that we were getting divorced, they were like, we love you so much, Mama. It's okay. They're like, we love you no matter what. And it was like so shocking to me. And it was like, I had built up this thing as such a big deal, like all for them. And it was just like, they love me no matter what. It was like, that was like, I don't know. That was just everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my friends would say, no, your kids won't be mad at you. They were like, that's ridiculous. And I was like, I don't know. For some reason, I just thought that would be the case, that they would never forgive me.
My middle child in particular, I believe, responded by saying, oh, thank God.
Oh, that's amazing. It was actually nice because so many people had stories like that. They were like, it was really nice how actually people came forward and were like, my parents tried to stay together when they finally got divorced. I was so happy. So it was just really nice that people said those things because I was so worried about it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's very much the case. People say that kids need to grow up with the whole family intact. which is of course ideal, but if you want to murder each other and are miserable, which wasn't 100% the case, then it's not better. And you can still have a great life and a great relationship with your kids and your ex, and do all the things, and even more so if you're happy.
Yeah. 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 Towards the end there, what started to dawn on me is like, I started to wonder, do my kids even know who I am not in a bad mood? You know, there was just something about me being like, have my kids ever even known me to not be in a bad mood? Because there was something about like the relationship where it's like, you know, we just got to a point where we weren't even necessarily comfortable in each other's presence, to the point that we would take separate cars everywhere because I just couldn't stand the awkward silence, and I wasn't interested in pretending to have interesting banter. I'd be like, yeah, I'm driving by myself. I can't take it. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Or I'd be around the house, and if I would wake up and she was still in the house, I'd be like, oh my God, when is she? When am I going to have the house to myself? Like, I'd just always be annoyed. And it sounds terrible. It sounds like I was just, I'm like, it sounds terrible, but it's like, yeah, but I don't want to be in a bad mood. I want to be happy. I want to be relaxed. I want to be comfortable. I want to feel like I can be myself. And then it started at the point where it's like, I guess when my kids were younger, I felt like it was worth sacrificing those things that I wanted for myself because I felt like I was doing it for them. But then as they got older, I genuinely started to worry about modeling a very unhealthy relationship. And I started to go, oh, fuck, I don't want them to think that this is what a marriage is supposed to look like.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. And I can totally relate to that, especially like during COVID when you're all in the house together. And it's like, it's okay when he was at work all the time, but this is bringing it to a new level. And then you just lash out or whatever. And then you feel like a jerk. And then you're sick of feeling like a jerk. And it's just like a spiral that.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying, to be fair, that I'm not sure Heather felt the same way. Like, I'm not sure if Heather woke up, she was like, oh, fuck, is he still in the house? Like, it was probably more of a one-way street.
Yeah. I think that's true with me too. He would be like, you don't even say good morning. And I was like, I couldn't. And that's like on me. Like, that's, yeah.
Right. And that's when I started to wonder, do my kids even know what I'm like when I'm in a good mood? And of course they do. It's almost like I look back and it's easier for me to focus on the ways in which I worry about having harmed my kids through modeling a bad relationship than remembering all the thousands and thousands of ways in which I've been a really great dad to them. Like, my kids know how much they're loved. They absolutely do. But I really do, for a couple of years at the end, there was like, oh no, are we making a huge mistake? But there was that part. But if we get a divorce, Scientology will have won. That was a big part of it.
Huge part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
I imagine that was even a bigger part of it for you, because how much even on your way out of the Sea Org, they were trying to break you guys up. They didn't really do that to me and Heather.
Yeah. They were trying, and they were even trying when after we left, they were trying to, like, through Dallas's parents, get Dallas and his family back in. And they were sort of blaming me for being the one that, that caused the whole problem with us leaving. And then, previous to us even leaving, when me and Dallas were trying to get married, they tried to separate us. So it was like this huge thing. I had done so much to stay together, and they just, I felt like it was just like, would have been the ultimate win for them if we got divorced, and they would have just like relished in that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Clearwater George and Kai are going to come over, and we're going to try to record something here in SPTV Studios for the first time. And we were going to try to wrap this up 10 minutes ago. So I don't know that we can actually go through all the the comments in the super chats, guys. I'm sorry. You know, I always try to do that. And honestly, let's be real. A lot of these questions are going to take this down a very emotional route that I'd rather not go down right now. So thank you guys all for joining us. I think we could probably do 10 of these chats, honestly. And we could do chats. We could do like a panel chats about this stuff. We could do chats with Nora and Liz and Laura and Serge and everyone I'm forgetting. But yeah, if you guys would like to see more chats about relationships, Scientology baggage in relationships. Oh, we were going to tell the story. We'll do it next time about how we respectively ended up getting married the way that we did in the Sea Org and how that works and everything. If you guys want to see more relationship chats, put a 1 down below or in the live chat. How about we wrap it up right there? Now I feel bad because Barb's been in the back office starring comments the whole time. Thank you, Barb, for doing that. You are the best. Anything else? Anything else we should say?
Nope. I'm excited to hear other people's stories too. Me and Serge were talking about it yesterday, so that will be interesting to see how other people dealt with this as well.
Awesome. Thank you for hanging out with us, guys. Thank you. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you to everyone who watches until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.